So now we'll take a look at how we can set up some macros and why they're useful to use them within a project. So I've got my project going here. A few different sounds going on. We've got drums, synths, hi-hats, various other effects and what have you. I'm going to focus on this synth in my group B, and it's on pad 5. So say, let's go into this synth, let's go to the plugin and see what we've got here. Compressor, reverb, flanger. So if you want to add a filter as well, low pass. And then a delay after. And if we wanted to bring some automation into this loop that we're creating, you know, I can start filtering this, go to the beat delay, add a bit more delay or feedback, change the time. Go to the flanger, mess around with that. And each time I'm going to a different effect, you know, it's not so fluid. I've got to scroll to the effect, tweak it, scroll to the next effect, tweak that. And, you know, it's not just like having everything at your fingertips. And that's the idea with macros, is that we can pull out our parameters, bring them to one page, and then just tweak the stuff we really want to tweak. So for example, on this synth, say there's nothing on the sampler I want to tweak. The compressor, I'm not going to be automating that, but like the reverb, certain elements of the flanger and the filter. So we've got our macro button here, so we can click on the macro button. That takes us to the macro page. If we want to set a macro, we hold shift, macro becomes macro set. So shift macro, we go back into our plugin instance, and the filter, the cutoff frequency of the filter is going to be a good one to automate. Shift macro set, and then we can set our macro, and we simply do it by touching on these touch sensitive encoders here. I just touched this encoder, and you can see that little button that has now appeared on the cutoff frequency. So now that has been added to a macro. The resonance, I'm going to do that as well. We'll go back to our plugin, the flanger, shift macro set. On the flanger, the mix. I'm going to add that to my macro, and reverb, probably the mix of that again. So with the reverb selected, shift macro set, reverb mix. You can see the little macro button, and the final one, the beat delay, shift macro set, beat delay. Right? So now with this synth playing back, I just go to my macro page, and all those parameters we added to the macros are on one page now. Cutoff frequency, resonance, delay mix and reverb mix. And what was the other mix? The flanger. So this is something that they could probably do with tweaking or advancing, because when you go to your macro page, I've put the beat delay, reverb and flanger mix on here, but it just comes up with mix for all three of these. If you go to the software now, we can use this drop down and bring up pages, and then we can click on our parameter, and I can see that this one, the first one of these mixes is the flanger mix, then this one is the reverb mix, this final one is the beat delay mix. So we can access from the software and see which mix we're editing, and obviously for the cutoff frequency and resonance it's quite obvious. So that's something to consider. But we've brought all of those parameters to one page, you know, and we can just really tweak, and we can bring whatever we want to this page. That's the thing, that's the beauty of it. Just pulling out those controls we really want to add lots of automation, play around with, without having to do all this diving around different plugins. So we've set up some macros there. Let's bring the drums in. So I have this pattern of the drums. So now let's look at setting up some macros on the drums. But this time with this first set of macros, we set it up at sound level. You can see here the sound is highlighted. If I go to group and master, there's nothing added there. So I added those macros on that synth at the sound level. So now let's look at this drum group here. And again, let's go to the group. Right, macros. So let's add some effects in here at the group level. So I go to add an effect, a beat delay maybe. That's pretty cool, bringing that in. Maybe have a filter before that. Try a high pass this time. And let's move the filter to before the beat delay. And something a bit more experimental, crazy, like a grain stretch. And the master on. Okay, so we've added some effects there at the group level. Now let's add the macros at the group level. So filter, shift, macro set, the cutoff frequency and resonance again. Let's go to the beat delay, shift set, add the mix to a macro, and the grain stretch. Let's add the on off, so that'll sound quite cool. So now with those things set up, I go to my macro page. Obviously, as with this sound, we can see at the sound level I've got those macros set. Go to this group, my drum group, go to my group level, and I have my macros. Filter, beat delay. And the grain stretch on. And it works the same way. The master level, you could do the same thing with the macros. And like I was saying, it's, you know, having those effects there for that drum group, it's much more fluid editing those sounds than if I was in here going grain stretch, right, turn that on. Go to my high pass, filter it up, go back to my grain stretch. There's just more steps involved. So the macros is taking away some of those steps and just making that process a lot more fluid.